I am a firm believer in running towards the fear. Scarily enough, the people that created AI still have no idea where it's going. And I get why creatives are scared. I really believe that the human factor will remain relevant. Basically, on the day that I was going to start with Paul, just pitch up at Venture's offices anyway. And I basically rocked up on the day and I stayed. And 12 years later, I'm still there.
Hey guys, and welcome to the episode of On the Couch with me, Reinold Benade from Nuka Nuka. I'm here today with a very established guest of ours, and she's been in the industry for quite some time, Elzanne McCulloch. I hope I said that right. Welcome to the show. I am really happy to have you here.
Thanks, Reinold. Awesome to be here.
Great. I think we'll jump right into the thicker things. As I always say, we let it flow naturally. We want to give our viewers insights that are not rehearsed, and we just talk about your time in the industry, you know, how you got started. I mean, that's always a great place to kick off. So how did it all begin for you, for Venture Media? Enlighten us.
Well, those are two different stories, how it began for me and Venture Media. But Venture was started as Venture Publications in 1990 by Paul and Reinold van Schalkwijk. And they grew the business from what was primarily just publishing house. And Paul was also a world acclaimed photographer and filmmaker. So basically what the purpose of Venture always was from the beginning was to tell Namibian stories.
Okay.
And their niche was always in tourism and conservation. Paul was a nature photographer and filmmaker, and Reinold was from the start with the magazines, the editor of the publications.
I see. Okay.
So they started with publications ranging from Namibia Trade and Industry, which is today the Namibia Trade Network, to Travel News Namibia, which was when the country had just become independent, basically the only tourism-related source of information in the country. The first, Reinold loves telling the story, that the very first email address that the tourism industry had was info@travelnews.com. And people would, and this was 1995, if anyone were to make a request to go to a certain lodge by email, they would send it to that email address. She would call the lodge down in Malta here and be like, listen, do you have availability for this? So they were doing things like that back then.
The amount of work.
Right?
Okay, yeah.
But they were publishing amazing stories about Namibia and sending it across the world, specifically in tourism. And then they had this Namibia Trade. It was called the Namibia Trade Directory back then. On the side of this, Paul was making documentary films. He made stuff for Discovery Channel, where he followed the lions across Etosha, and just amazing stories that they were telling. And that's where Venture Publications was born. And they published thousands of magazines over the years, and books, and helped even the Namibia Tourism Board was only established long after Venture had already been there. So they helped them get up and running in terms of how are we going to tell this country's story.
I see.
So that was always the crux of it. What is the story that we're sharing with the world? And I came along in 2014. I had just finished studying film at Stellenbosch University at the drama department.
Hey.
I did the tech side, writing and directing and editing. And I was going to come work with Paul on documentary films. That was my plan. And in March of that year, exactly almost a month before I was going to start work, Paul passed away in a plane crash while photographing Etosha from the sky. So doing what he loves.
Beautiful,
right?
Yeah.
And I was a little bit worried because I was like, this was the plan, and now things.
And also because you had this model, sorry to interrupt you, that you saw this person that has started so much, and now he's taken out of the equation, and you're just thinking, will this legacy continue? You know?
Yeah.
But, excuse me. Yeah.
No, and I was, I had known them my whole life. Their daughter is one of my best friends growing up, and so I had been in their space and knew what they were doing my whole life. But the plan was, I was going to come make movies with Paul. Yeah. And since I was a little girl, wanted to make movies. So that being shaken in that moment, that idea, that picture that you have of your life in your head, and it being so emotional on top of it, because this was someone that I really loved and respected and I'd known my whole life. And the family and all the trauma that went with that, there was a little bit of a moment of, oh no, what now?
Yeah.
And I decided to basically, on the day that I was going to start with Paul, just pitch up at Venture's offices anyway. And Red was there, and I was like, "Hi, I'm here. I don't know what the plan is,
but I'm here. Like,
exactly." Red was like, she also doesn't know what the plan is, so this is a good space for us to not have any plans together. And I basically rocked up on the day, and I stayed, and 12 years later, I'm still there.
it's the ideal story. If we're talking about being a creative in the creative industry, plan all you want, folks. It never goes according to plan.
Exactly.
So all of this, studying in Stellenbosch, had this plan changed completely, but you basically said, listen, I'm going to pitch and we're going to see how this is going to go. And where exactly did you start when it all kicked off? Was it writing pieces? Was it actually shooting a bit here, a bit there? Like, how did the ball get rolling?
So when I started, Venture was doing its magazines. In the office with them was Stay Today. Today they just paid, they then became Pay Today, and today they just ID Today, Chris and Nadia. And then also Paul's photography business called Tala. So it's Paul van Schalkwyk's photography library. Images that are sold across the world. Paul's high-end art photography.
Okay.
So basically those three companies said, okay, you're here. You can do a little bit of work for each of us. And they each paid me 1,000 Namibian dollar a month.
You were balling back then,
right?
weren't you?
I could afford everything. So I got a $3,000 a month salary, split my time between the three companies, and basically was editing photos, some of Paul's last stuff that he had been busy with. I don't think anyone in the company even knew what Photoshop was, but was making like posters and post designs for Stay Today. And then Travel News or Venture, the magazine, Sret was like, can you write them?
I was like, of course I can write. You're paying me $1,000 to write. I can write.
Exactly. That's such a difficult question though, because writing is so subjective to like, I feel I can write a script, but can I write a magazine article? I don't know, but let me try it. And my very first article I ever wrote was about Slowtown coffee roasters. And they had also just started. So it was really cool. We were like, you're new, I knew, we're going to figure this out. And it just developed from there. And within a couple of months, the photos were done. So that part of the company didn't need me anymore. And I just transitioned more and more into Venture. And what I found was that, yes, I was a filmmaker by training, film and theater, but at the core of it, I'm a storyteller, and stories transition across mediums. And I think in the creative space, that's something that we've definitely found over the last 10 years specifically, is that you can't be single medium anymore anyway.
No. There's no chance.
So you need to hone your storytelling skills and then let your tech skills pick up along with it, your technical skills, so that you can, across mediums, make sure that you're telling a story.
No, 100%. And I like that because you've had a few guests on this show, and especially in the creative industry, no one ever just woke up and it's like, okay, photography, this is just what I'm doing, and walk into a business, photographer position, and that is life. It rarely happens that way. And I actually love it when you're telling me the story, because I think in the creative industry, you have to be so versatile. You have to have a bit of this, a bit of that. I think it just makes you way better equipped for the job at hand, and it allows you to dabble a bit on a few things.
Yeah.
But the storytelling element specifically is quite beautiful to hear, because I know a lot of times, like our lovely videographer F's here, yes, he does shooting, films, etc., but a lot of work goes into telling the story. And that kind of brings me to my next piece. When you read an article in a newspaper or you read it in a magazine, I think often you never know that you're actually reading a good piece written by someone that can tell a story until you read a bad piece. So I'm quite interested in that. How did you essentially advance that skill? Because when you started off with Slowtown, it was probably very much like, I will tell them about the coffee. But how did you slowly but surely progress into being a skillful writer, able to really get people hooked, engaged, considering the short attention span nowadays?
Yeah. So I think a very, very big part of that is gaining the knowledge on how to be emotive.
Okay.
So how to make people feel something. So the skill is not really in the writing and the sentence structure and that anymore. And I'm sure we'll touch on it, but these days, those technical things can be fixed for you. It's about getting to the core of the story, the purpose of it. What message am I trying to relay to people? and this is across mediums. So I agree with you that creatives need to be multifaceted. In fact, in my team, if you don't have at least more than one skill, you're not even up with a chance. I'm sorry, but we're working in a space now where we have to be multi-skilled. And yes, you can have your central niche that you're specialized in, but you need to do yourself the justice to yourself to say, I am going to improve my skills on a variety of mediums to be of more worth. And what that allows you to do is to become a better storyteller. But the storytelling at the heart of it is, that's where it all lies, because the medium doesn't matter. People absorb media in different formats. So you might read the magazine version of that story. Someone else is going to listen to the podcast version. Someone is going to look at the social media post, and someone is going to read it online as a blog, so it's shortened or it's lengthened, however way. The purpose of the story and of a good story is finding the why. Why am I telling the story? Who am I telling it to? And what do I want to make them feel? And I like that. And that's, for me, when I realized that little trick, that it doesn't have to be a good story, it doesn't have to be a long story, it doesn't even have to be that interesting, but at the end of the day, when someone has taken the time to absorb it, it has to have made them feel something. And that feeling can be irritation.
I didn't see that one coming, because you got me all hooked in on how you were speaking about it. I was like, you got me on the heartstrings. You're like, it could be irritation.
It can be irritation.
Okay, clever.
Not with the story, but with the subject or with the problem that the story presents. It can be anger. It can be obviously joy and love and happiness. Or it can also be, wow, this made me think. It can be wonder. And those are my favorite. Those ones that make people change, not just change the way they think, but take a moment to see a different perspective. And that's why I like working with various storytellers, because everyone has their, their flag that they're waving, and they're like,
they think
this is my thing.
That they're good at when they're right.
So you'll spot an Elzanne story from a mile away. That's why I can't just fill all my publications with my stories, because I have a very specific message that I'm trying to send out into the world. And that message is not necessarily for everyone, or maybe I don't want to always be preaching to the choir,
Of course.
So I'm trying to look for different people to reach. And that same concept is true with different storytellers. So I'll take an example now. We do the Fly Namibia in-flight magazine, and people always say, it must be such a massive task. How difficult is it to write for a monthly magazine? We said it's actually the easiest thing in the world, because we don't have a specific audience. Our goal with the Fly Namibia magazine, it's not just on the plane. It's distributed everywhere in Windhoek, all the towns that Fly Namibia flies to, it's distributed at. It's distributed online. Okay. So the goal with that publication is any single individual that picks up that publication, and they can be Koos at age 62 or Penda, who's a 21-year-old university student at NUST, worlds apart, and everyone in between. If they pick up that magazine, they must find one story in there that's for them.
That they can relate to.
That they can relate to, makes them feel something, that they learn something from, or that they're just like, that was interesting. That's enough for me. It's an emotion. I had a reaction to it. So with that being said, you have this massive audience, but you also have then what we've created is a massive base of storytellers that speak to these different audiences, and that make sure that whatever niche you fall in life, or maybe you're a niche-free person like I like to think I am, you can entertain me with anything. You find something when you pick up that magazine, or you read it online, or you follow its social media pages, or you find an interesting article on Fly Namibia's website. It's something that speaks to you. And even if it's just one page in the 70 pages, then we've done our job.
That is beautiful. And okay, there's two things here, and that's why I personally love having, number one, this podcast to just flow naturally, because I'm also learning a lot, which is fantastic, right? Exciting. And funny enough, two things. I think often in marketing strategies, you always learn that you need to segment the market. You need to be specific. But never has it occurred to me that if you have the potential or the possibility of speaking to everyone, why don't you, Quite interesting. I mean, in your case, I think it's a bit easier. You have a few pages to work with, so you have a bit of a broader shot, whereas with the 15-second video, you might not have, And you might not have that, what shall I call it?
That range.
That range, thank you very much. And then the other thing, so usually we learned in marketing strategies, you always try to segment the market. So I quite like the fact that you've opened up and there's that reach to speak to more than one individual. It doesn't matter the age, the cultural group. I love that. The second part is that when you kind of talk about these things about really leaning into finding something for the reader to relate to, and that's, like you said, sparking irritation or emotion, that is a very human element that is implemented. So that kind of leans us into what is the most popular trend at the moment, AI, and how people utilize it, and will my job go extinct? What is your feel on that in your office personally? Is it a tool, number one, you use? Is it something you feel that impacts your work for the better or for the worse? Is it a threatening feature? How does that feel in your space?
Okay, so let me take you on a journey in my mind of, we've spoken about this before, but venture is not an agency, which we love. We love not being an agency because you're very right in saying that certain brands do have to create market segments. It's obvious. So especially corporates, especially people selling very specific things. We are very lucky in the sense that because we're not an agency, where I would rather categorize us as a creative studio, but at the core of it, we're actually a storytelling studio.
Okay.
So we say, because we're a storytelling studio, we have this opportunity to mold different stories to different audiences, and not have to be as specific, because two very different human beings can find value in the same story. We're just multiplying it to different mediums so they find it on the platform that speaks to them. So it's the same story at its core,
Okay,
but they're finding it in the universe, in the digital space, in print, on the radio. They're finding
basically what works for them in a sense.
Exactly. So what we've done is we've started formatting the mediums to speak to the individual rather than the story. Because the story, as a brand would do, here's your campaign. This campaign only works for housewives between the ages of 35 and 65.
Okay.
You know. Whereas if I'm telling a story and it's a Namibian story and it Venture's mantra is stories that matter.
Okay.
That's what we talk about. So we say, when we tell a story, it needs to matter either for the entire nation, for a community, for a business, for a single individual.
Okay.
It doesn't matter where we hit the mark. It just has to matter to someone. And
I like that.
It's really, really awesome when you think about things like that and stories that way, that you're just spreading it so widely. And it's not spreading it thinly, it's spreading it widely, because we have this capacity these days to really get stories to people on platforms that they want to do.
I see.
Where they want to absorb their story. Now that brings me to your second half of your question. And my answer is a resounding yes. We use AI every single day. Okay. I am a firm believer in running towards the fear and leaning into it.
Different tactic, but it works.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Lean into it, work with it. It's not going to go away. We have to be cognizant of that. It's not going anywhere. Scarily enough, the people that created AI still have no idea where it's going. And that's probably the most terrifying thought of all.
Yeah.
And I get why creatives are scared. Within the next, we don't do 5-year plans anymore, because what is 5 years from now going to look like?
You can't even plan a week ahead.
Exactly.
And life changes completely.
Exactly. But my honest professional opinion is that creatives need to very strategically educate themselves and inform themselves in how to successfully use and adopt AI. Not to replace, not to be the driver of momentum, but to elevate what they're already busy with. So whether that is productivity, whether that is we can always all be better. So whether that's improving yourself and your skill and your outputs, whether it's whatever you need it to be, it just has to be a tool. I think that whoever invented the wheel made those guys that were carting everything by horse terrified. And when Microsoft first introduced spell check, all copy editors in the world
were like, no.
Oh my word, I am redundant now, right? Video killed the radio star, right? And still here we are listening to radio every day. And you know why? Because it's a real human voice and real human opinions that we're still authentically hearing across the radio. And I use AI every single day. And I can take you through a little AI journey. I did this in a podcast with Debbie Rawls just literally 2 weeks ago. Her and I had this conversation. So I know from experience that this conversation can take 47 minutes to complete. So I won't lean into that too much.
Listen, we've got time, carry on,
we can link my and Debbie's podcast about AI
I'll
to
go
this
paste it
one.
and just do like a deviating storyline and come back.
Exactly. I'll go post it in the links, in the comments. But I'm a really firm believer that use it as a productivity tool to make yourself better. So I use it daily. I use ChatGPT, I use Claude, I use Otter.ai, and I know what the story is that I need to tell. And now I am very well versed in, having used it for 3 years, AI, in how to help me tell that story more succinctly, because we have short attention spans, faster turnaround time, and just reshaping it for, like I said, those different audiences. But what my biggest piece of advice, or the biggest key to this, is a good creative, a good editor, a good writer, a good business person. You need to know what you want the outcome to be. You need to know what the end goal is.
Yeah.
I have read the most atrocious articles written by ChatGPT because the inputs it was given were lacking or non-existent. The prompt was, when I was playing around with this in the beginning, so my brother is the captain of the Namibia cricket team, and I think the very first thing that I asked it to do, I don't know why I picked this topic, but I was like, hey, ChatGPT, write me a 500-word article about Namibia's cricket captain. And I pressed enter. That's all I gave it.
Okay.
And it came back with the weirdest article about Merve Erasmus, who was born on the 2nd of June, 1985. And so his birthday is
definitely
11 April 1995. So it got like all the facts wrong.
I see.
And how he had played for Australia, and I just went back.
You were like, I didn't know my brother at all. Like,
this is amazing. And I replied to it and I said, wow, where did you get all of this? He's like, no, you just wanted a nice story. So I gave you a nice story. And the minute that you have that realization of, we cannot blindly trust, but what we put into it is what we'll get out, a molded version of that. And when you realize that you are the knowledge base, yes, it can go find knowledge for you, and AI will start getting better and better and better at that.
Of course, as time proceeds.
Exactly, as the more it learns from humanity. But that's the key. It needs to learn from humanity. And it's got a lot of learning still to do. We are at iceberg levels of what has been digitized in terms of human knowledge and what hasn't. So AI still has a lot of human knowledge it has no access to, like history of human knowledge. So as we start digitizing that more and more, it will learn more and it'll grow and it'll get better. But the story about Harry was a silly example of, if I hadn't known what I wanted the outcome of that article to be, or had some reference, I could have very easily just blindly copy-pasted that and published it and went on.
Bob's your uncle, yeah.
I saw a newspaper article the other day, and I won't say in which paper, where at the very bottom of the article were the lines, would you like me to export this in a PDF or Word document format for you?
No way.
So that you can send it to your editor.
Oh, goodness.
It made it into the newspaper.
That is
I get
a little bit shocking.
Work study requests, or what do you call it? CVs, where at the bottom of the email it says, would you like me to format this for you for your potential employer, or reformat? And I'm like, guys, let's be honest that yes, it's a tool, but we are still the overlords here. They're not yet. We have oversight, and we need to make sure that when we're using these tools, that we use it for an end goal that we need it to reach.
I hear you completely. It's actually, you still require the skill and the knowledge.
Yes.
You'd still be able to differentiate between someone that has been a copywriter for 10 years and someone that started off yesterday, because how they communicated to the AI, what they receive, how they manipulate and filter to get it to be proper. That is also at the end of the day super important.
It's a back and forth. It's a tool. So you're using it back and forth. You're putting it in, you're taking it out again, you're putting it back in. I talk to my AI daily and I'm like, yeah, that's not quite there yet. Let's do this, and this.
Just a bit.
So a big part where creatives will never lose is the soul,
Of course.
the authenticity. How did that moment make you feel? Only you can tell the AI that for it to capture that. And then things like style and taste. I think it's going to still play a massive role in the next couple of years as we're adapting the AI in terms of contextual references. So AI is still very Eurocentric, right? It's very northern, global north.
Yeah.
So something that would work in New York, if you're an ad agency, for example, or you guys are pitching something for a company here, AI might have a wonderful idea for you that would be really successful in New York, but it doesn't work for Keetmanshoop. So,
funny you mentioned that.
Exactly. We have to contextually still edit it. We have to still be the bearers of the style and the taste.
Of course.
And it will become more and more, and it already is, very trend dependent. So it feeds off what digital trends there are out there. And we as creatives have to sometimes be careful that we don't become too trend dependent, because we're the creators of the trends, right? We should be setting them. And if we're just constantly regurgitating trends, who's going to set the next one? I think that to a big extent is also where AI does fall short. It can't think up new ideas.
Yeah,
it's limited to what humanity has created.
I hear you. And the words you use, I mean, you couldn't have used better words. How do you explain to a robot what you want the feel of the room to be?
How do you explain to a robot what love is?
Yeah, like it's such a tricky, so especially if you're in a creative industry, I mean, how do you carry that across? Because if I'm talking to you and I'm saying like, listen, the taste the client is going for is a very playful look and feel. How exactly do you communicate that, and how do you kind of use the information you got and you put that into a way that it is usable? So that's very much the way human implementation and skill and experience comes into play. So very well put. And once again, learning for the creatives out there, please listen. So beautiful, love that. And interesting enough, on the podcast you were previously where you discussed this, was that your first exposure where you kind of delve into this whole thing and went deeper and deeper? Or was it a matter of you knew about it beforehand and you kind of gradually educated yourself when it came to the AI realm?
I believe that the best thing anyone can do for themselves ever is read. And even if it's social media posts, at least just read the full post, okay? Don't just skim. But I've been reading about this for years and years. And there's wonderful books out there that basically when it came out that I just said to myself, because I had that fear. All creatives have that initial fear. I think the first time where real generative AI was shared with me, the guy who WhatsApped me the link was like, oh, I wonder if we'll still need copywriters in a year. This was 3 years ago. And I wanted to reply with the middle finger emoji, but I didn't.
He didn't. You're like, I'm going to keep it, professional.
Exactly. But I said to myself in that moment that even if this is the end of certain skill sets, how are we as creatives going to adapt what makes us creative to lean into this, run towards the fear, lean into it, adopt it, and then you see where are the shortcomings. So the biggest shortcoming, especially with companies that are using, and Coca-Cola got massive backlash now for their fully AI generated Christmas ad that they put out a few weeks ago. The biggest shortcoming is authenticity and real human experience and emotion, which is something that AI hopefully will never be able to replicate. So we have to lean into that. And as creatives, how do we bring that authenticity to the fore? And you don't have to remove yourself from AI to do that. You can share authentic experiences, thoughts and processes and ideas. And, I had this podcast interview with Reinold just now, and this is how it made me feel. Let's unpack that and let's, talk about that and let's write about that. We can do that with our AI friends or compatriots, but
Employee of the month.
Employee of the month. I said to Debbie in our podcast the other day, I'm like, AI is my most productive employee by far, but it's not my most authentic employee.
Ah, very well put.
It's not my most original employee. It's not my most earnest employee. There's these human emotions that just fall short. And if we're talking about storytelling and we're talking about the purpose and the why, being we want someone to feel something, then we can't take humans out of it.
You speak as well as you write, because I must say it's starting to come through as you speak, which is quite nice. I love that, and that also brings me back to the initial thought I had right in the beginning when you spoke about communicating to different people and the mediums. I think a lot of people, if you're in the digital space, you feel like, okay, this is redundant, or radio's not that anymore. However, we're in Namibia, which is still very much the one of very few places that still have traditional media, and all of these channels still matter. And that's quite interesting because I think AI is also new to Namibia. So I think it's really nice that you can say that, first of all of these mediums are still relevant. It's all just about how you communicate it. And that's actually the thing I wanted to say earlier. So now it just came back now.
So I am a massive believer in that mediums don't die.
No.
Mediums, the options grow and they change, but they never die. So print has had, thanks to what was 10 years ago, or when Trump first did his little show and dance, fake news, print has had a massive resurgence because there's a level of trust that is associated with print that is missing in the digital space. And the reason behind that is print is expensive.
Yeah.
So people aren't taking the chances that they do. Print cannot be deleted. Once something is printed, it lives forever.
It's printed.
It's printed. Yes, we say these days nothing digital can be deleted either. People can take a screenshot, but there's a slim chance that you can minimize the fallout of something that was said online by removing it or editing it and saying, no, look, this is what, and if a screenshot pops up somewhere, then it's fine. But print can never be deleted. This book will exist forever until the whole world burns down. A copy of it will somewhere exist.
It will exist.
So there's a level of trust that comes with print that will never be removed. And people are reverting to that because they're looking for something that they can trust.
They can trust.
Because digital is easily manipulated. How scary is it that people will go back to going to live events to hear someone speak because they're uncertain if the video of that person speaking on that topic is actually that person or if it's a deep fake.
If it wasn't altered. And I mean, quite recent, we had a few situations in Namibia where that became quite like a realization.
And before deepfake was a thing, it was basic editing. So if, say, the editor cut that speech, BBC just got in mountains of trouble for it. The head of BBC basically had to quit because they edited the Trump speech and said two things that he both said, but out of context, they edited it together.
Of course, and context is everything.
Context is everything.
Yeah.
So if we're taking that concept of mediums will continue to exist, people will find the medium that they prefer and lean towards it, and we look back at the audience and their search for trust, their need for authenticity and what is real and what isn't. And with AI, that question of what is real and what isn't is going to become the most important question. And Google recently, I say recently, probably 4 or 5 months ago, Google sent out their new information to users about search engine optimization. And it's not called SEO anymore. It's now called GEO, Gemini Engine Optimization. So Google is saying to their AI, called Gemini, that this is how we're ranking websites now. And you know what my takeaway was from that 200-page report that I read? That AI can't learn from other AI, right? It needs human inputs and new information. So Google is going to start elevating your content, elevating your digital spaces based on the amount of original, authentic content you are providing it. So the more human-created images, things that are very obviously authentic photographs or imagery or artwork, non-AI generated. Things that are very obviously authentic video, non-AI generated, and things that were written by human matter experts that can give new information to the internet. Those authentic elements will help increase your search ranking, because Google realized that its AI cannot learn from. Imagine everyone just posted AI generated content on the internet.
It was easy. You didn't need to like book and cast and things like that anymore. You could just generate it from your living room.
But then what's going to happen is the AI is then going to reach a stalemate, because there will be nothing new for it to learn from. So it can't develop. So Google went and said, no, we don't want AI stuff. We want authentic stuff, so that our AI can keep learning. And it very clearly said, it says, you don't have to shy away from AI, but we need you to show us that there's still authenticity, that there's still human stuff coming onto the internet. We need to populate, and you'll find it on social media that people are becoming very quickly very disenfranchised with AI generated content.
Yeah. It's almost kind of like you see it and it's immediately almost a negative reaction towards it.
This isn't real.
Yeah.
It's not real. Swipe.
And you get better at identifying it as well.
Exactly. But now the AI is becoming so good that I took a minute yesterday. I was like, is this real? Is it not? And I really had to dig deep.
Yeah, and imagine you as the creative. Then I'm just like, Mom, please don't click on links.
Exactly.
It's not real.
It's not real. But I think that question of, so I see a lot of creatives, and it's definitely the trend that we're leaning towards, going back to that documentary style of raw and rugged. Raw and rugged's going to win the race, because raw and rugged is very easily going to be recognized as real. And that's going to be, in the next couple of months, I see that in the digital space, that little battle unfurling of how are we going to restyle our content to make sure that the viewers don't skip over us because we're so polished and beautiful and well lit.
Yeah.
That they're like, oh, it has to be AI. And the models are so photoshopped, airbrushed, and everything's so perfect. No, this is AI. And my human brain that's now disenfranchised with AI is going to scroll over it. So I think I see the trend going, that we're going to revert to that, make it real. Make sure that people know this is real.
That is so interesting. And I actually learned something today. And it also brought me to the realization that there are a lot of smart people out there that think about stuff that I haven't even gotten to yet. Amazing. I think for today, that was beautiful, useful, and I genuinely learned today. I think sort of bringing it to a bit of a close, what advice, what sort of guidance would you give anyone starting in your position, earning 1,000 salary? What is the word of advice you would give to them if they are starting off there, not to lose hope, to keep at it, anything like that?
I think it's most important for any creative, any business owner, any entrepreneur, is for us to realize that we still have value to add. That don't get discouraged. AI is a tool. It can do a lot of jobs, but it cannot replace human emotion and authenticity. And everyone in my business, and I'm sure everyone in your business, and all of my friends, everyone has had touch points with AI that gave them a moment of like, oh my goodness, am I still going to be relevant?
Yeah.
And I really believe that the human factor will remain relevant. And you need to make sure that what you're bringing to the table, you know, they always have that thing of make yourself irreplaceable in a space, and you'll never get kicked out. I think in the digital space, our humanity will be what makes us irreplaceable. The fact that we can reason and feel and trust our gut instinct, massively big fan of trusting your gut. And if something doesn't feel right, pull it. It's not gonna land. In some, like I said, even if the story matters for a lot of people, for one person, if it's gonna hurt or offend or disenfranchise someone, pull it. But I really think that our authenticity and our humanity are gonna keep us in the room. And if you can bring that to the foreground as much as possible and elevate your humanity and your authenticity into the spaces that you're working with, and human connection. I think human connection is a very, very big part of it, because people are going to more and more and more need humanity support, need each other's support, because we're going to get really tired of just talking to our robots.
I like that. All right. Beautiful. Thank you so much for being on the show. And I think there'll definitely be a follow-up. especially leaning a bit more into the AI side of things, because I think there was a lot of fruitful points mentioned that I think we can elaborate on.
Yeah, I can talk till the cows come home about. We can get very technical.
I like that. Elzanne, thank you so much for your time. And that brings us to a close for On the Couch with Reinold.